clay has a way of biting into you and like infecting you where you just think about clay all the time. And I think that's what happened to me. And I think it happens to a lot of people. I am Deborah Guzman Meyer. I have been teaching at the Montclair Art Museum for 12, 13 years. And so today I'm going to make a spoon rest. So I'm going to start with about 1 pound of clay. I'm shaping this into a sphere because I teach in middle school, so this is a sphere. And I wedged it, and now I'm just kind of compressing it basically with my hands by tapping it before I put it down. And I wipe, you have to make sure your bat is dry. So just need it to dry the bat. So now I'm gonna start. First I'm gonna center, so I get my hands wet. And I'm going to center a little lower than I would if I was making a mug or a vase, because I'm going to end up with a spoon rest. Okay. This is one thing I tell all of my students, like, how do I know it's center? Well, it's not wobbling. It looks like a record player spinning on itself. If it was doing a little wobble, then it's not center. So once I center, I'm going to go down into, I'm going to go like this. First, I'm going to open downwards. And I'm going by vision. I want to be 3/4 of the way down. I'm going to stop. And with a needle tool, I'm going to put it into the center of my clay to see how much clay do I have left. The reason I want to check that is because when I cut this off at the end with the wire cutter, I want to cut into something and I don't want to have a hole on the bottom of my pot. So I checked and I'm good. I can actually go a little bit deeper and then stop. So now that I went down, I'm going to open out. I'm going to grab my fingers here. And I'm basically pulling the clay towards me. When I'm centering, the speed of the wheel is fast. When I'm opening, I slow down the wheel. Once your vessel is open, it's a little more fragile. More things can go wrong if you go too fast. You have to have all the patience and be kind to yourself. I know that you're going to make lots of mistakes, and that's okay because you learn from the mistakes. It's partially tactile memory. Clay feels like this when it's about to give up, or it's getting too thin, or it's too thick. So once I open, what I want to do is I want to compress the foot of my vessel. So because I checked with the needle tool and I also went down and I opened, has opportunities for air and water to sort of get in there, and that can give me cracks once it's bisfire. So I'm going to compress it. I have 2 ways of compressing. One way is with a sponge, and I take it from the side of the vessel and slowly move very slowly, I'm going to move the sponge towards the center of my vessel and then hold it there. And if I was going to do this just with a sponge, I would do this three times to be really sure that there's no air or water in there. Another way that I like to compress is also using the wood rib, which is this. So every time you're going to use a tool, you should get it wet so that it glides on the clay. And the way that I like to do it is to take the bottom of the wood rib and basically at medium speed, medium to slow, I'm just going to compress it by holding it down. This gives me a really good compression. And since I'm making something really shallow, I really don't want it to crack. So what this does takes extra slip and whatever clay needed to come off from there so it can be really tight, all the little molecules of clay, that just happened by doing this. So that's a really good way to compress. Sometimes beginners have a hard time handling some of the clay tools because they're a little bit intimidating. Because you can just, it can fix your pot and you can also destroy your pot with this. But I think this is really good. Okay, so now that I compressed, I'm going to lift some of this clay upwards to make it thinner walls, and shape my spoon rest. So I'm going to get it wet. I grab my sponge. I'm going to put my hand on the outside of the clay. It's called pulling a wall. I'm gently pulling upwards. Most of the time you can do this 2 or 3 times, depending on what you want to make and how much clay you have. I started with just 1 pound for this. You don't need a lot of clay. So one of the things I want to do now, this is a needle tool. I'm going to trim some of this. This is way taller than I wanted it to be. So I'm going to trim some of this down, introducing the needle on the side of the clay until I feel it that it cuts, and I'll take the whole thing off. And now this edge is all jagged, so I'm going to use the sponge to make it nice and smooth again. I have an MFA, and my MFA is in photography. And then after I had an MFA, I got married, I decided to have kids, and then I was in a funk, and I decided to I was teaching digital photography here at the museum, and I decided I wanted to try something 3D. I've done other things 3D, but not ceramics when I was getting my MFA. I decided to try it, and here I am. I haven't looked back. One of the things I like to do for my personal spoon rests is that I think it's kind of cool to decorate them a little bit. So I'm going to use the back of my needle tool. I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm just going to make a swirl. And I'm doing it while this is in fresh clay, because I want it to be a soft spiral. I could do this if I was carving it later in leather hard, but I don't want it to be too sharp. Okay, so now I'm going to use the wood knife. Again, you want to get it wet. And what I'm going to do is just clean up the foot so there's less for me to trim later. So I'm just going to run it at the base. Lastly, I like to put the little tip of my wood knife right at the bottom of my pot. That gives it a place for the wire to sort of grab on and go across. Before I cut it off, I'm going to shape where the spoon is actually going to rest. So for this, I'm going to get my hands wet. I'm going to put my hands on one side and kind of make an open U like this. That's how wide I want my spoon rest thing to be. And then I'm going to press down with my finger to give it that curve. And you don't want to, like, it gets a little thin at the rim. So you don't want to mess with it too much. You just want to give it that shape. So now to cut it off, I'm going to grab a bunch of water. I'm going to put it on the bat. This is called the bat. And this is something I tell all of my students, beginners. These handles are deceiving. Don't hold it by the handles. Look at this wire. If you go like this, it will cut your pot that you worked so hard to do. So you got to do like you're going to floss like this. Grab some of that water and go straight across. And put it aside so it doesn't hurt your pot. And then I just push it from the bottom and hold it with the other side here and put it on the board. That's it. All of these are 1 pound because I measure them. So each time it shrinks a little bit more. It can shrink anywhere from 15% from the original size to like 20%, depending on the clay. So if you want something big, you have to throw it bigger than you think. The best place to start, like the museum has Wine and Wheel, which is a workshop, and that could be a good place to be like a little bit frustrated, but if it's something for you, it'll like something will switch in your brain where you're like, whoa, I kind of get how it is and I see how difficult it is, but like your soul or your brain or something is calling you to the challenge. And then you sign up for a class. A class is great because you can't do this on your own. Wheels cost thousands of dollars. Kiln costs tens of thousands of dollars. So, and it's nice for the class because you have a community of learners, basically. There's all these people that some of them are starting and some of them have been doing it for many years, and you'll like learning from each other. So it's a good thing.